The grand ballroom shimmered with light, crystal chandeliers scattering reflections across the marble floor as the city's elite gathered for another night of celebration. But beneath the glitter and champagne, Alexander Veyron, the billionaire everyone envied, wore a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. At 36, he had everything a man could want: sprawling mansions, global corporations, and a stunning fiancée, Clarissa Montrose. She was every bit the socialite, gorgeous, graceful, with a laugh that drew cameras and envy alike. Yet in the quiet corners of his heart, Alexander harbored doubt. Love was the one thing money could never guarantee. People bowed at his name, but would anyone still stand by him if his empire crumbled? Or worse, if he lost the very strength and independence that defined him? His fiancée whispered sweet nothings, held his arm proudly at galas, and smiled like she was the happiest woman alive, but Alexander's instincts told him otherwise. Too many times, he had caught her eyes straying toward jewelry, yachts, and men with pockets nearly as deep as his own. Too many times, her affection seemed calculated. The seed of suspicion grew into a plan. If Clarissa loved him, she would prove it in hardship. And if she didn't, he would finally know the truth. So he staged it. A car accident, conveniently timed after a late-night meeting, with carefully crafted reports that his spinal cord was damaged. Overnight, the vibrant, commanding billionaire was transformed into a man bound to a wheelchair. The tabloids exploded with sympathy, and the world buzzed with speculation. But it wasn't the headlines Alexander cared about, it was Clarissa's reaction. At first, she played the part beautifully. She rushed to the hospital in designer heels, tears smudging her makeup, clutching his hand like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. "Don't you dare leave me," she sobbed, cameras flashing as she laid her head against his chest. "We'll get through this, together." Her words were perfect, but her eyes flickered with something he couldn't miss: fear, calculation, the silent tally of what this meant for her glamorous future. Back at his estate, the test truly began. Nurses were hired, but Alexander insisted on keeping his old staff, the ones who had been with him long before Clarissa entered his world. Among them was Elena, the maid. She had always been invisible to him, quiet, efficient, blending into the background with her plain uniform and unremarkable appearance. But when the household shifted around his new condition, she was the one who moved with quiet certainty. She adjusted his pillows without being asked, brought his meals with warmth in her tone, and never once looked at him with pity. Clarissa, meanwhile, began to crack. The first week, she was attentive, posting photographs of herself holding his hand, milking sympathy from the public. By the second, her visits were shorter, her voice strained, her complaints whispered when she thought he couldn't hear. "I didn't sign up for this," he heard one night as she vented to her friend over the phone in the adjoining room. "He can't even walk. What kind of life will that be for me?" Alexander lay awake, his chest tight, every word slicing into him. But he stayed silent, watching, waiting. One evening, Clarissa breezed into the room in a sequined gown, clearly dressed for an event. "I can't stay tonight," she said lightly, avoiding his gaze as she adjusted her earrings. "But don't worry, darling. I'll send the nurse in to look after you." Her perfume lingered in the air long after she left, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the wheelchair he sat in. Moments later, Elena slipped in quietly, carrying a blanket over her arm. "It's a cold night," she murmured, draping it gently across his lap. Her hands were careful, her touch steady. For the first time, Alexander truly looked at her, not as staff, but as a person. Her eyes held no agenda, no performance. Just kindness. It struck him then, his test had only just begun, but already the lines were being drawn. One woman flaunted devotion for the cameras, while another, unnoticed and uncelebrated, showed it in silence. And though he would not admit it aloud, Alexander felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't expected, an ache not of loss, but of possibility. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion that once rang with laughter, champagne corks, and endless soirees now echoed with the hollow sound of wheels gliding across polished marble floors. Alexander kept his facade flawless. He let his head droop with exhaustion when Clarissa entered the room, allowed his hands to tremble slightly, and even practiced the subtle stiffness of a man resigned to helplessness. To the world, and especially to his fiancée, he was the perfect image of a broken billionaire. Clarissa's mask began to slip quickly. At first, she arranged photo shoots of the two of them in the garden, his wheelchair framed just so while she draped herself elegantly at his side. "See, darling," she cooed as flashes went off. "They'll say our love is stronger than tragedy." But as soon as the cameras vanished, so did her tenderness. The rehearsed smile would fall, replaced by a thin line of irritation. She would sigh heavily if asked to bring him water. She scrolled endlessly on her phone, taking calls in hushed tones that ended with brittle laughter. Alexander noticed everything. He studied her the way he used to study market reports, analyzing every inflection, every glance, every sigh. He felt the truth sinking in, heavier each day. Clarissa wasn't grieving for him, she was grieving for the lifestyle she feared losing. One evening, she came into his study, her heels clicking impatiently. "Alex," she began, her voice sweet but her eyes sharp, "we should talk about the wedding. Do you think, perhaps we should postpone? Just until you're feeling better." His heart clenched at the words. Postpone. Not, stand by you. Not, we'll make it work. Just delay, as though love had an expiration date stamped on it. He schooled his face into blankness and nodded, murmuring, "If that's what you think is best." Later, after she left for a charity gala she insisted she couldn't miss, Elena entered with a tray of tea. She wasn't glamorous like Clarissa, nor did she coat her words in sugar. Instead, she moved with quiet efficiency, setting the cup within reach. "You didn't touch dinner," she said softly, her accent curling gently around the words. "You need strength, sir." He glanced at her, something twisting inside him. "What does it matter? I'm just a burden now." She paused, meeting his eyes with a steadiness that startled him. "You are not your legs. You are still you. That matters. No pity, no false cheer, just truth." For a moment, Alexander felt stripped bare, more vulnerable than when he sat before the world in his chair. And in that raw silence, he saw her differently, saw the way her hands were roughened from years of work, the faint tiredness around her eyes, the dignity in her posture. She had no fortune to gain, no reputation to polish. And yet here she was, caring for him with more sincerity than the woman who was supposed to be his future. The days continued in this rhythm. Clarissa came and went, always in dazzling gowns, always with excuses. Elena stayed in the shadows, ensuring he was comfortable, bringing books she thought he might enjoy, adjusting his blanket when the nights grew cold. She never lingered for long, never overstepped, but Alexander found himself waiting for the quiet sound of her footsteps. One afternoon, he overheard Clarissa on the phone again, her voice sharp with frustration. "Do you think I want to waste my life playing nursemaid? He's half a man now. I can't, no, I won't. I'll find another way." The words, cruel and dismissive, burned into his mind. He closed his eyes, gripping the armrests of the wheelchair until his knuckles whitened. The test was working, yes, but it was breaking him too. That evening, when Elena brought him supper, she noticed the untouched food from earlier. "You're not eating again," she said quietly, her brows furrowing. He gave a bitter laugh. "Maybe your mistress is right. Maybe I am half a man now." Elena shook her head firmly, placing the tray down with more force than usual. "Forgive me, sir, but she is no mistress of mine. A man is not measured by what he cannot do, but by how he chooses to live. And you are still choosing. That makes you whole." Her words settled deep within him, a warmth cutting through the cold weight Clarissa had left behind. For the first time in weeks, Alexander ate, not because he was hungry, but because Elena's faith demanded it of him. He realized then that while Clarissa's love was unraveling thread by thread, another bond, unexpected and unspoken, was beginning to weave itself around him. A bond built not on wealth or image, but on something far rarer, honesty and care. The storm that had been building finally broke on a night heavy with rain. The windows rattled as wind swept through the estate, and thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. Alexander sat in the dim glow of the fireplace, the wheels of his chair gleaming faintly in the light. He had grown used to silence in these late hours, used to waiting for Clarissa's hurried footsteps only to hear her excuses about dinners, galas, and important meetings. Tonight, however, she entered with none of her usual flair. No dazzling gown, no rehearsed smile, just sharp eyes and lips pressed into a thin line. "We need to talk," she said flatly, tossing her purse onto the sofa. Alexander looked up, his voice calm though his chest tightened. "About the wedding again." Her laugh was brittle, echoing against the marble floors. "The wedding, Alex, be serious. Do you really expect me to chain myself to this life? To this?" She gestured at the wheelchair with a sweep of her hand, as though it were a stain on her designer world. He felt the words like knives, though he kept his expression carefully neutral. "This is who I am now. I thought love meant standing together when life changed." "Love," she snorted, pacing the room. "Do you know how many offers I've turned down for you? How many doors I've walked past when other men, whole men, would have given me everything. I didn't sign up to be a caretaker, Alex. I signed up to be the wife of a powerful man, not a broken one. Her cruelty cut deeper than any staged act of paralysis. For weeks he had suspected, for nights he had overheard whispers, but hearing it from her lips stripped away the last remnants of hope. He had set a trap to test her heart, and she had walked straight into it, bearing her selfishness without shame. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then Alexander spoke, his tone low and steady. If that is how you truly feel, Clarissa, then go. No one is forcing you to stay. She blinked, startled. Just like that. No fight, no plea. A bitter smile tugged at his lips. A man in a chair can't chase after someone who's already running away. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. She grabbed her purse, muttering something about wasted years, and stormed out. The echo of the front door slamming reverberated through the mansion long after she was gone. Alexander sat motionless, staring into the fire. The test had worked. He had his answer. But instead of triumph, he felt only hollowness, as though he had lost something he never truly had. His chest ached, his throat tight, but he refused to let the tears fall. He had always been a man of control, a man who didn't break. Tonight, however, he felt dangerously close. It was then that the quiet creak of the door interrupted his solitude. Elena stepped inside, carrying a folded blanket. She froze at the sight of him, her gaze flicking briefly to the empty glass of whiskey on the table and the shadows under his eyes. "She's gone, isn't she?" she asked softly. Alexander's head tilted toward her, surprised. "You knew." Elena's lips curved into a sad smile. "I saw the way she looked at you. The way she looked at the chair. It was never love, sir. Not the kind that survives storms." Her words, spoken without hesitation, struck him harder than Clarissa's betrayal. He lowered his gaze, whispering, "And yet, I still hoped." She moved closer, draping the blanket over his shoulders with a tenderness that made his chest tighten. "Hope isn't weakness," she murmured. "It just means your heart still believes there's someone who will choose you, not your wealth, not your power, just you." He looked up, meeting her eyes. There was no performance there, no calculation, only sincerity that steadied him more than he cared to admit. "And you?" he asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. "Would you choose me? Like this?" Elena hesitated, her cheeks flushing, but her voice was unwavering. "I already do. Every day." The simplicity of her words shattered something inside him. For weeks he had lived surrounded by lies, masks, and betrayal. Now, in the quiet presence of a maid who had no reason to stay, he found a truth so raw it terrified him. For the first time in years, Alexander allowed himself to cry. Not loud, not broken, but silent tears that slid down his cheeks as Elena stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. She didn't speak, didn't try to comfort him with empty promises. She simply stayed, and that was enough. In that storm-lashed night, Alexander realized the cruel test he had devised had revealed more than just his fiancée's heart. It had uncovered his own longing for something real, something unpolished, something unbreakable. And as the fire flickered and Elena's quiet presence wrapped around him like the blanket she'd brought, he knew his life was about to change in ways far greater than he had planned. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of the mansion, painting the marble floors in gold. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered inside Alexander's chest. He had made his choice during that long night by the fire. No more silence, no more pretending. It was time for truth. Word spread quickly. By noon, the estate was buzzing with staff rushing to prepare for unexpected guests. Alexander had ordered Clarissa back under the guise of a serious conversation, and she arrived with her usual flair, dressed to perfection, lips painted in a defiant shade of red, eyes glittering with suspicion. Cameras followed her car, as she had made sure of it. When she entered the great hall, she found more than just Alexander waiting. Members of the household staff stood at the edges of the room, including Elena, her plain uniform freshly pressed, hands folded neatly in front of her. A few reporters had been discreetly invited as well, enough to ensure that whatever happened here would not remain hidden. Clarissa's gaze swept over the scene, confusion flickering for a moment before she plastered on her trademark smile. "Darling," she purred, striding forward. "I rushed the moment I got your message. I've been so worried about you." Alexander sat in his chair, expression unreadable. "Worried," he repeated softly, letting the word hang in the air like smoke. Interesting choice of words. She faltered but quickly recovered, kneeling gracefully beside him. Of course. You've been through so much. But you're strong, we'll get through it together. He studied her carefully, then placed his hands on the wheels of his chair. Slowly, deliberately, he rose. First to his feet, then fully upright. Gasps filled the hall. The reporters, cameras clicked wildly, capturing the moment as Clarissa's painted smile crumbled. You, she stammered, eyes wide. You can walk. Yes, Alexander said simply, his voice steady. I could walk all along. Silence fell, broken only by the frantic snapping of cameras. Clarissa's face drained of color, then flushed crimson with rage. You mean, you lied. You pretended to be crippled. How could you? I could, he said coldly, because I needed to know the truth. I needed to see whether you loved me, or whether you loved the life my money gives you. He stepped closer, towering over her now, his presence as commanding as it had been before the charade. And you showed me, Clarissa. Every sigh, every excuse, every word you spoke when you thought I wasn't listening. You showed me exactly who you are. Her composure shattered. She glanced around, realizing the staff and reporters had heard everything. This is ridiculous, she spat, rising to her feet. You tricked me. You humiliated me. No, Alexander said sharply. You humiliated yourself. I simply gave you the chance to reveal your heart. And it was empty. Clarissa's eyes narrowed, her pride battling her desperation. You'll regret this, Alex. Do you know what people will say? That you're cruel, manipulative. Let them, he cut in, his voice steel. The only regret I have is ever mistaking your hunger for love. He gestured to the door. Get out. Whatever future you thought you had here ends now. She froze, disbelief etched across her face, before spinning on her heel and storming out, the flash of cameras chasing her into the daylight. The hall grew still. Alexander's gaze shifted, settling on Elena. She stood quietly, not seeking the spotlight, not even daring to meet his eyes. But he crossed the space between them, each step deliberate. When he reached her, he gently lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. You, he said softly, the weight of his words pressing into the air, saw me when no one else did. You gave me dignity when I thought I had none. You stayed, even when you had no reason to. Her eyes shimmered, her voice barely above a whisper. I only did what anyone with a heart should do. No, Alexander corrected, shaking his head. You did what only someone who truly cared would do. And for that, Elena, you have given me more than all the riches in the world ever could. Gasps rippled through the room as he took her hand, raising it gently to his lips. From this day forward, I choose you. Not as a servant, not as a shadow, but as the woman who showed me what love really means. Elena's cheeks flushed, her breath trembling as the reality of his words sank in. She tried to protest, to remind him of the gulf between their worlds, but Alexander silenced her with a look that held nothing but certainty. The reporters captured it all. The billionaire who had faked paralysis, the fiancé who revealed her greed, and the maid who had quietly, steadfastly loved him. And as the story rippled beyond the walls of the mansion, one truth remained unshakable. Alexander had found the treasure he had been searching for all along. Not in power, not in wealth, but in the unguarded heart of a woman who never asked for anything in return.